And we're good? Thumbs up. This morning we are examining Psalm chapter 8, the 8th Psalm. And it's a simple, but it's also a really profound song with incredible depth. And it's got a lot of theological meaning, it's got a lot of practical insight about our identity as God's people and how that practically works out in our lives. Now, little ones, the psalm is about God, but it's written probably by a guy that we called David, meaning it was either written by him or it was written for him, or it was attributed to him as being connected to or a complementary part of the Psalms as a collection, which he wrote many of. And King David was described as a man who God himself called a man after my own heart, which is quite a nice thing to have said about you, isn't it? It is a pretty profound thing. And I think the reason God gave this very specific and glowing reference to David is because at specific times in David's life, he showed that he truly understood what worship is, okay? This doesn't mean that David always gave a glowing example of a godly life well lived. Indeed, often quite the opposite. David was a messed up character. But regardless of his faults and regardless of his failures, David knew the purpose and joy of his life was bringing glory to God. He knew who deserved to be worshipped. And the author of the psalm began Psalm 8 in verse 1. He says, O Lord, your majestic name fills the earth. Your glory is higher than the heavens. Now, the word here translated glory is hod, meaning honor, splendor, majesty, or even vigor, which is the same word that is used to describe when God bestowed majesty upon King Solomon and his reign. It's the same word, hod, which means that God can have glory and that God can also bestow something of his glory upon humans. The idea is pursued even further in verses 4 and 6. The psalmist understood his place. Just a human, made a little lower than the Elohim, which is a generic term for beings that live in the heavens, be they angels or the gods or God. Seemingly, humans were made less significant in relation to these heavenly beings. If you look at the levels of ancient cosmology that we looked at last month, you've got, the heavens, and then you've got the sky dome, yeah? And under the sky dome, you've got the air, and then you've got the earth where mankind lives, and then you've got the waters and the underworld. And so where humans dwell and where the Elohim dwell, humans are far below. But then in verse 5, it surprises us by pointing out that God crowned mankind with glory. This time the word is kavod, which is the same word that Moses used when he asked God to show him his glory. Show me your kavod. And God responds by calling out his name, Yahweh, Yahweh, and allowing his goodness to pass by Moses, which came in the form of a literal description of God's character. God doesn't so much show Moses his glory, he speaks his character, which is his glory. It's fascinating. It means that God's glory is somehow interconnected with God's name. It's interconnected with his nature. And his glory is connected with how he reveals himself to humankind. In other words, kavod is God's honor, it's his splendor, it's his glory, or even his reputation. And there is this fascinating linguistic link between the noun kavod and the corresponding verb kaved, right? So kavod, the noun, kaved, the verb, both words come from the same Hebrew root, and kaved means to be heavy or to be weighty. For instance, God rained kaved hail on the Egyptians. He rained heavy hail in Exodus 9:18. And Solomon is described as burdening the people with a kaved yoke, a heavy yoke. But the word is more broad than that as well. The fifth commandment says to honor your father and mother. And the verb is kaved, to weight or too heavy your father and mother. Doesn't make much sense, does it? The meaning is that as children we should understand and respect the gravity or the weight of the role that our father and our mother hold as our parents. And so, pulling this all together, we need to read the English word glory. What we need to do is unpack it then, unpack it with the depth of all of the underlying Hebrew words that help us get a better understanding of what we are talking about. And we'll look a little bit more at that later on. Psalm 19:2 says that the heavens declare the glory of God, the kavod of God. And creation responds actively to its existence by bringing attention to this reputation or this splendor of God. And creation recognizes, if you will, the heaviness of what it means that God exists and that everything exists through him. It acts in awe and respect because of the weight of his reality. And the psalmist understood that our jobs as humans is similar, but even more profound. Because unlike the rest of creation, God himself crowned mankind, verse 5, with something of his own glory and majesty, which we refer to as being made in the image of God. Right back at the beginning of time, God made mankind in his image. And he gave mankind their job description. We'll link back to Genesis 1:26-28. And then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they might rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. And so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. For what purpose? Why was humanity given these things? The answer is pretty huge, actually. And it all begins with the word image. Tselem. This is the word that our Bibles translate idol. Images or likenesses sculpted across all ancient Mesopotamia to represent the pagan gods. The very thing that God commanded Israel never to make. Why? Two reasons. First, no image that we make could ever possibly truly represent God. It would be blasphemous, irreverent. Secondly, God already had an image. He made them, male and female, in the Garden of Eden. Humans, to be the representatives, to be the images of his glory on the earth. Think of it like this. Picture a huge statue in a conquered city, right? Perhaps take King Wally of the Queensland dynasty, circa 2000 AD, yeah? If you're an NRL fan, you understand. If you're not, don't worry. The image carries with it or imposes a sense of the weight of the reality of the king that it represents. When the Blues come to Suncorp Stadium, they feel the weight as they walk past King Wally. They know they're in for a hard time. The image is not the king, It represents the reality of the king, a shadow of the true power that is behind what is seen. And brothers and sisters, this is what the Bible means when it tells us that we are to glorify God. The psalmist recognizes that God is the ultimate heavyweight, that along with all creation, we, as the Westminster Shorter Catechism reminds us, we are to respond to that glory or that reputation of weightiness by bringing glory and respect to God. The chief end of man is to glorify God. So the psalmist didn't look at himself and how great he was. He realized that in and of himself, he was nothing. Instead, his eyes were drawn to God and how great God is. Because it's not about me and it's not about you. We are given life so that we can make that life all about God. We were given glory so that we might represent God. And in so doing, give God glory that is far more profound and in a far more profound way than anything else in creation can. Because he is the focus. And I don't think that takes away any of our self-worth. Rather, I think it seats our self-worth in something that is far more stable, far more reasonable and beautiful than the assumption that our lives are an accident and are the lucky outcome of some ancient cosmic explosion. And we're going to pause there. And we're going